The curtain was supposed to stay closed. No one was meant to hear what was happening behind it. Not Princess Charlotte, with shaking arms at trying to stay polite, until her voice broke. "Camilla, it hurts." Not a scream, not a tantrum. Just a 10-year-old trying not to cry, while holding up something she never should have been carrying. And when a royal guard heard her say that, he didn't ask who was behind the curtain. He didn't wait for orders. He tore it down. Because whatever was happening behind the velvet dash wasn't instruction. It was abuse. Now, before we show you what he uncovered, and the moment the silence in that corridor finally shattered, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. Because this wasn't etiquette. It was something else entirely. And he was the only one who moved. The North Portrait and Textile Gallery inside Windsor Castle wasn't meant to echo. It was a long, velvet-walled chamber with blackout curtains, so thick the sound never bounced. They absorbed everything: light, breath, history, even footsteps, especially footsteps. Sergeant Rowan Ainsley moved through it anyway, as he did twice each afternoon, on quiet rotation through the most inactive wings of the palace. The rooms where protocol required presence, but rarely expected questions. Places assigned to guards like him, the trusted ones, the silent ones. He walked without sound, boots soft on heritage carpeting, hand resting loosely by the hilt of his ceremonial sabre. He wasn't here to confront, he was here to observe. That's what made him dangerous. Rowan had served 13 years in the Coldstream Guards, 10 of them with special clearance for internal royal security. He'd stood post at weddings, funerals, state dinners. He'd broken up a hallway, spat between dukes that never made the papers. Once he'd intercepted a tourist who slipped away from a guided tour to try on Queen Mary's feathered coronet. The man still believed it was a prank gone wrong. It wasn't. But none of that explained what he noticed today. Because something was wrong with the curtain. The central panel of the gallery's right side alcove, always pulled taut and secured, was slightly bowed. Just enough for someone who knew the gallery well to spot it. A ripple across the bottom. A slight sag in the left corner where the brass ring had slipped off its hook. Not a gap wide enough to see through, just a shift in tension. As though something, or someone, was behind it. Rowan slowed. His boots fell still. And in that instant, the gallery's silence pressed harder. A stillness that wasn't natural, not ceremonial. He turned his head slightly, not enough to telegraph alarm, but just enough to let his peripheral vision confirm what his instinct already knew. There was someone behind that curtain. A long breath came next, almost soundless. Not the deep, relaxed exhale of a staff member breaking protocol. Something smaller, thinner. A shallow inhale drawn through a nose, clenched tight with effort. A child. He didn't move yet. Didn't reach for his radio. He didn't call out. Because inside this palace, what you did first was listen. He took one step forward, then another. And just before he reached the edge of the curtain, a voice. Thin. Strained. Trying its best to sound brave. "I said I can lift it. Please don't pull." The words barely came through, but the pain behind them did. Rowan's entire frame stilled. His spine straightened. Because whatever that was behind the curtain was not etiquette, was not tradition, and was absolutely not safe. The whisper wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even meant to be heard. But in the North Portrait and Textile Gallery, where sound travelled only in the direction of danger, it slid under the curtain like a warning. Rowan's chin lifted a fraction. Children had soft voices. This one was softer than most, and far too controlled for the strain laced through it. He approached the alcove slowly, deliberately, each step placed with the precision of a man who'd spent years learning how to move through royal spaces without disturbing the atmosphere around him. His shadow fell across the velvet. The curtain didn't react, but behind it, the breathing changed. Not the breathing of someone frightened into silence. The breathing of someone trying not to cry. He stopped a mere foot from the panel. "Hello," he said quietly. Not fully announcing, not fully retreating. The gallery gave nothing back. No shuffling. No voice. Just the steady hum of controlled air temperature and the faint scent of old fabric. If someone were hiding, they'd stay perfectly still. If someone were working, they'd speak. But this was something else. Rowan lowered his voice, gentle but firm. Is someone behind the curtain? Still nothing. He reached out and felt the velvet. Not enough to pull it, just a light press of fingertips. The fabric was warm. Someone was definitely there. The curtains had been sealed for conservation, tattooed with white labels, warning against light exposure, rough handling, or even accidental brushing. No one was allowed inside, unless approved by the preservation director. No staff were scheduled in this wing, and children were never permitted, which made the next sound impossible to ignore. A small gasp, sharp, contained, like the sound someone makes when their arm is suddenly pulled. The stool beneath creaked softly. A tremor in the wood. Then the voice again, a little more desperate, the edges fraying. I'm trying, I really am. Just please don't pull. Rowan's jaw tightened. This was not play. This was not mischief. This was a child trying to stay obedient under pressure. He scanned the corridor with the speed of someone trained to map threats in seconds. No staff approaching, no noise from adjacent rooms, nothing to suggest this was an approved lesson or a supervised activity. He raised his radio, pressing the side discreetly. Control, he murmured, confirm Princess Charlotte's location. His voice was steady, but his pulse wasn't. Static cracked softly. Then the reply, Princess Charlotte is currently in East Wing Study 3. Private handwriting lesson confirmed present at 14:10. 14:10. It was 14:23 now. He looked at the curtain again. Another small gasp came through, this one trembling, like the breath right before tears spill. And then, I can't hold it anymore. It's too heavy. Rowan didn't breathe, because now he wasn't just hearing a child. He was hearing a child being asked to endure something she physically couldn't, and worse. She was trying her best to obey. He placed his hand flat against the curtain. This wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous, and whoever was behind it had crossed a line that no title, no hierarchy, no tradition could protect. Sergeant Rowan Ainsley didn't blink. He kept his hand pressed lightly to the curtain, fingers splayed, not gripping, not yanking, just enough to feel the air shift through fabric with every shallow breath from the other side. The voice came again, weaker this time. Please? It's slipping. He pressed his radio again. Control, he said softly. Confirm again. Princess Charlotte's precise location. I need visual confirmation. A pause. Then, still listed in East Wing Study 3, tutor confirms she was present at 14:10. No relocation requests logged. He lowered the radio slowly. The child behind this curtain wasn't an imposter, wasn't a mistaken identity, wasn't a cousin or staff child sneaking where they shouldn't. It was her, and she wasn't speaking to herself. She was responding to someone. Rowan took one step back, not in retreat, just to re-center. His training had taught him how to suppress emotion, how to observe first, how to wait before acting. But in his gut, the waiting was over. He moved 3 steps down the curtain's edge, just enough to angle past the nearest seam. From here, he could see the slight silhouette through the backlit velvet, not clearly, but enough. A small figure, standing on a raised surface, arms outstretched, elbows shaking. Something draped across her forearms, heavy, uneven, thick. She swayed slightly, but kept her arms up. And next to her, another figure, taller, close. Too close. Rowan's hand slid toward the hilt of his ceremonial sabre, not to draw it, but to brace himself. Then the child's voice returned, softer now, breaking on every third word. She said, I have to hold it until my arms stop shaking. That was enough. He took one final step forward and spoke through the curtain, voice crisp but low. Ma'am, he said, I need confirmation. Is Her Royal Highness with you? A beat. Then a voice emerged, clipped, practiced, falsely composed. She's receiving instruction. This does not concern you, Sergeant. Rowan didn't answer, didn't move. He let the silence stretch. Then the child's voice came through again. This time it wasn't trembling from exertion. It was straining to stay respectful. Camilla, it hurts. 2 seconds passed. 3, and then Rowan's voice changed, just slightly. Whoever is behind this curtain is no longer acting under protocol, he said, and the child currently in your care is not supposed to be here. There was no reply, just the faint creak of the stool under Charlotte's weight, and her breathing, now reduced to shallow bursts, like someone trying not to cry while holding an impossible pose. He lowered his hand from the curtain. Every part of the picture was now clear. Charlotte had been removed from her approved location. She had been brought to a sealed conservation wing, and she was now being physically overburdened under a royal textile to correct her posture. It was more than protocol violation. It was child labour disguised as etiquette. And Rowan Ainsley was no longer observing. He was preparing to intervene. "Is Her Royal Highness with you?" Rowan's voice was even, low. It didn't rise above the velvet drapery, but it didn't need to. It was the kind of tone that carried regardless. There was a pause. Then, from behind the curtain, came the unmistakable reply. "She's receiving instruction," Camilla said curtly. "Do not interrupt." Rowan didn't move. "Instruction!" He looked again at the fabric outline, a child on a stool, arms stretched straight out from her sides, elbows visibly shaking, and on her shoulders, that wasn't a shawl, it was a royal relic. He recognised it now, the genealogical banner of Cumberland, an embroidered family tapestry over 300 years old, stitched with gold-wrapped silk and ceremonial crests. It was heavy, fragile, preserved behind glass until only recently removed for cataloguing. It had no business being handled, certainly not by a child. Rowan placed one hand on the curtain rod overhead, just lightly, as though confirming its stability. It held. Behind the fabric, the stool creaked again. Charlotte exhaled through her teeth, a stifled sound of effort. Then came the awful scrape of a correction. Camilla's voice, dispassionate and instructive, as though guiding a servant's hand. "Higher, please! The crest must not sag!" A faint choking noise, and then, "Stop slouching! Royals endure discomfort without dramatics." Rowan's jaw set. He'd heard that phrase before, in different forms, from junior officers hazing recruits, from old-school disciplinarians punishing posture under the guise of decorum. He'd heard it in training camps and in barracks, in institutions where pride pretended to be pedagogy. Never once had he expected to hear it inside Windsor Castle, spoken to a child. Then the voice came again, not from Camilla, from Charlotte, a whisper, breaking. "Camilla, it hurts!" The last word cracked, not screamed, not shouted, just broken, like a single porcelain thread snapping inside her throat. Rowan didn't reach for his sabre, didn't yank the curtain. Not yet. He stepped back half a pace and pressed the intercom on his collar. "Security 2, he said calmly, requesting silent backup. North Gallery. Immediate." His voice remained steady, but his body had shifted. His shoulder squared, his stance locked. He gave Camilla one more chance, one final line to retreat from. "Ma'am," he said through the curtain, "you are not authorized to physically burden a minor royal with a conservation artifact. I am formally requesting access to confirm Princess Charlotte's welfare." Silence. Then Camilla's voice again, sharper now, cold with control. "She's fine. She must learn how to present legacy items. You're overstepping, Sergeant." Then another sharp instruction from her, muffled by fabric. "Hold your elbows higher. We don't sag in photographs." Rowan could barely hear Charlotte's response. But he did. "I'm trying. I really am." And with those 5 words, something inside the corridor changed. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was child abuse, wearing the mask of royal preparation. And the next time Rowan moved his hand, it wouldn't be to press a button. It would be to tear everything open. Any physical strain imposed on a minor royal requires oversight. Rowan's voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. The curtain was no longer a barrier. It was a veil. and whatever dignity it shielded had already collapsed. Behind it, the child shifted again. The stool creaked, a brittle, uneven sound of effort. Charlotte was still trying to obey. Camilla's voice responded sharply, immediately. She must learn to withstand discomfort. All royals do. Rowan's stance changed, imperceptibly to a civilian, but unmistakable to any soldier. His weight shifted over the balls of his feet, his shoulders squared, not in defiance, but in readiness. A second guard had already arrived at the far end of the corridor, responding to his earlier signal. The man took up quiet position near the archway, not speaking, just watching. Inside the alcove, another muffled exchange. Arms up, Charlotte. Then, stop fidgeting. You'll ruin the seam. The tapestry must have slipped slightly, a brief drag of fabric on fabric, then a soft gasp. Not from Camilla, from Charlotte. Rowan took one slow step forward. "Ma'am," he called again, "if she cannot lower her arms freely, I am required to intervene under institutional safeguarding." Camilla's reply cut through like a knife. "You are not required to do anything except your post." There it was. Authority as dismissal. Entitlement wrapped in protocol. And then came the voice that silenced everything else. "Please, my wrists!" No cry. No scream. Just a child pleading for reprieve like it was a favour, not a right. Rowan's hand moved, not to his sabre, not to his radio, to the curtain. His fingers curled slowly into the velvet seam near the upper latch. It wasn't stitched tight. It was mounted on rings. Ornamental, decorative, the kind that look permanent but give way under pressure. He gave her one final out. "One last time, ma'am," he said calmly, firmly. "Release the child." No response. He adjusted his grip, and just before he pulled, another whisper from behind the curtain, almost inaudible. "I don't want to drop it. She said I can't, but I can't hold it anymore." That broke something deep inside him, because this wasn't discipline, this wasn't posture. This was a child being used for display, for photographs, for performance, and being told it was her duty to suffer quietly. His hand tightened. The rings groaned slightly under the strain. He looked once over his shoulder at the guard down the corridor. A nod. No alarms. No shouting. But the curtain was coming down, and whatever was hiding behind it would have to face the corridor it thought would stay silent. The silence that followed wasn't passive. It was heavy. The kind that presses against the eardrums, waiting for someone to break it, for someone to admit that the line had been crossed. Sergeant Rowan Ainsley gave her every chance. His hand rested firmly on the edge of the blackout curtain, fingers curled just enough to feel the weight of the fabric. He had no weapon drawn, no order barked, just the knowledge, anchored deep in his chest, that whatever was happening on the other side of that velvet wasn't etiquette. It wasn't instruction. It wasn't royalty. It was cruelty, and it had a child's breath trapped beneath it. Behind him, the second guard shifted slightly. No words, just a subtle bracing of stance. Prepared. Aligned. A show of silent unity that meant, "We are with you." Rowan's voice dropped just above a whisper, not for effect, but because anything louder would have shattered what little dignity remained on the other side of the curtain. "Put the child down," he said. No response, only the soft click of a heel repositioning on wood. Then Charlotte's voice, barely a breath. "Please, I'm not supposed to drop it, but my wrists feel stuck." That was the moment, not dramatic, not loud, but final. Rowan took in a breath, set his feet shoulder-width apart, and pulled. The curtain gave way with a clean, decisive sound, rings popping from their track, velvet collapsing in folds to the ground like a royal stage being struck mid-performance. And behind it, truth, revealed not in shouts or spectacle, but in posture. Charlotte stood on a low wooden stool, arms stretched stiffly forward under the crushing weight of the 17th century Cumberland tapestry. Her wrists were turned slightly inward, where Camilla had adjusted her grip, and her small fingers trembled from holding the edge taut. The fabric sagged under its own weight, draping heavily across the child's shoulders, its gold threading gleaming under the room's soft lighting. Her face was pale, composed, but barely. One tear had reached her jawline and stopped there, as if unsure it had permission to fall. Camilla stood directly behind her, arms crossed, expression unreadable, unmoved, as though the tableau before them was normal, educational, deserved. Rowan stepped forward slowly, and not toward Camilla, toward Charlotte. He reached out carefully, easing the tapestry's edge from her left wrist. The fabric shifted, heavy, stiff, and Charlotte winced involuntarily as circulation returned to her fingers. She didn't cry, she didn't collapse, she just whispered, "I didn't mean to ruin it, I just couldn't hold it anymore." That's when his voice shifted again, no more warnings and no more appeals. Just 3 words. "She is done." He turned fully to Camilla now, shoulders squared, eyes locked. The curtain lay in a heap on the floor. So did the illusion that this was anything less than harm. Rowan eased more of the tapestry off Charlotte's arms, careful not to let the heavy fabric drag her down with it. Even as he lifted it, he felt the weight, far more than any child her size could reasonably support. 5 kilograms sounded manageable on paper. In practice, held at full extension by thin wrists and developing joints, it was punishment. As soon as her right arm dropped, Charlotte inhaled sharply, tiny, quick breaths like someone trying to hide the sting. Red marks wrapped around both wrists. Her fingers were stiff, half-curled from strain. Rowan steadied her gently by the shoulder. "You're all right," he murmured. She nodded once, still trying to maintain composure. Camilla exhaled loudly, as if she were the one inconvenienced. "This is unnecessary drama," she said. "I was teaching her how to carry herself with dignity. She'll need it for her future role." Rowan turned slowly, hands lowering the tapestry to the nearest cushioned bench. He didn't slam it, didn't make a show of it. He placed it down with more respect than Camilla had shown the child beneath it. Then he faced her directly. "This," he said calmly, "is not posture training." Her lips tightened. "And you are not entitled to interfere in instruction." He stepped once closer, not imposing, not looming, just enough that she understood he was no longer speaking as a subordinate. "I'm interfering," he said, "because a child was being physically strained beyond her capacity." Camilla scoffed. "Oh, please. Children exaggerate discomfort. Royals must learn endurance." She was being dramatic. That word again. Dramatic! Charlotte, still standing on the stool, whispered, "I wasn't." The simplicity of it struck the corridor harder than any shout. Rowan gestured toward the fallen curtain, then to the tapestry now folded on the bench. "Ma'am," he said, the authority in his voice unmistakable, "this is forced strain. This is unauthorized handling of a historical relic. And," he added, eyes narrowing just slightly, "this is child labour." Camilla's expression twisted. "How dare you insinuate—" "I'm not insinuating," Rowan cut in quietly. "I'm observing." He stepped back to Charlotte's side, offering his hand as she wobbled, stepping off the stool. She took it, hesitantly, as if she still feared being scolded for needing help. When her feet hit the floor, her legs trembled slightly. She looked down at her wrists, red, sore, slightly swollen. "I tried," she whispered. "I really tried." The corridor seemed to constrict around that single sentence. Rowan felt it, not as outrage, but as a deep, cold clarity, the kind that told him nothing here was ambiguous. He straightened fully now, no hesitation, no softness. "What happened here will be reported," he said. "Immediately." Camilla stepped forward, fury flickering. "You will not label me an abuser." He didn't flinch. "You labelled yourself," Rowan replied, "the moment you chose a child to hold your burden." Camilla opened her mouth, but footsteps approached, soft, swift, and they would change everything. The gallery wasn't built for speed. Its thick carpet and narrow arches slowed even the most urgent footsteps, but Catherine moved through it anyway, swift, focused, silent, but unmistakable. She didn't need an escort. She had heard the word welfare breach over the security channel, and she'd heard Charlotte's name. By the time she reached the North Gallery, the curtain was already on the floor. The air hung still and loaded, like a room where something wrong had finally been dragged into the light. Rowan stood off to the side, posture locked, eyes forward. The tapestry rested in a folded heap on the velvet bench, its golden embroidery now lifeless. Camilla stood near the stool, expression tight but composed. Still composed. "And in the middle of it all," Charlotte, pressed close to the wall, arms now down at her sides, but not relaxed. They trembled at the elbows, the muscles twitching involuntarily after being locked too long. Her cheeks were pale, her lower lip bore a faint indentation, where she'd clearly been biting it to stay quiet. Catherine didn't shout, didn't demand answers. She simply stepped forward. Charlotte saw her and straightened instantly, instinct overriding fatigue. But Catherine saw the wrists, red, swollen, skin creased where fabric had pressed. She crouched beside her daughter, gently lifting one arm, not with panic, but with the practiced care of a mother who knew pain and pride often lived together in small, stubborn hearts. "What happened to your arms?" she asked softly. Charlotte looked down, then sideways. Her voice barely carried. "She said I had to hold it up for photos." Catherine didn't react, not visibly. Her hand stayed on Charlotte's arm, but her gaze rose, slowly, deliberately, and landed on Camilla. They locked eyes. Camilla offered a small, stiff shake of the head. It was instructional, a posture lesson. She needed to learn grace under pressure. "You used her like a mounting frame," Catherine said flatly. The words weren't loud, but they cracked the room in half. Camilla exhaled sharply through her nose, as if insulted by the comparison. "I had her hold a relic. That is part of her future role." "She's 10, Catherine rose, still calm, still quiet. "She's 10, and you made her hold 5 kilograms of royal textile elevated on a stool for an unknown period of time alone, while forcing her to maintain posture for your documentation." Camilla folded her arms. "She's being groomed for a crown. That comes with weight, literal and symbolic." "No," Catherine said. She reached gently for Charlotte, who leaned into her mother's side with hesitant relief. One arm still trembled even when lowered. Catherine wrapped her coat lightly over Charlotte's shoulders. "She will carry that weight when she is ready," she said coldly. "Not when you feel humiliated by her growing confidence." Camilla's mouth opened, then closed. Because in that moment, nothing she could say would carry more authority than the child now clinging to the mother she trusted. And just down the hall, another pair of footsteps approached, even, unhurried, but impossible to mistake. Prince William didn't rush. His footsteps were calm, intentional, each one landing with the kind of restraint that told everyone he had already made up his mind before arriving. He entered the gallery without an announcement. No aids, no sound of radio chatter behind him. Just presence. Rowan stepped aside instinctively. Catherine remained still, one hand around Charlotte's shoulder. Camilla straightened, fixing her posture as if that alone could frame innocence. William took in the scene with a single sweep of his eyes. The fallen curtain. The unrolled tapestry on the bench. Charlotte leaning into her mother, small and quiet, one arm hanging limp. He didn't ask for context right away. He didn't look at Camilla. He looked at Rowan. "What happened?" he asked. "Exactly as you saw it." Rowan, still at attention, answered with clarity. Princess Charlotte was located behind a sealed curtain in the North Gallery. She was standing on a stool, arms extended outward, supporting a 5-kilogram embroidered textile artifact. She appeared under strain. Verbal instructions were being issued. When I asked if she was all right, she replied, "It hurts." William absorbed each word like a ledger entry. No surprise, no outrage, just absorption. Rowan continued. She was not authorized to be here. Her scheduled location was Study 3 in the East Wing. I requested access. The Queen Consort refused. He paused. Upon further strain reported by the Princess, I removed the curtain and intervened. William's voice didn't rise, and he turned toward Charlotte. She looked up at him, eyes steady, though she blinked too slowly. He crouched, not to examine her, not to perform, but simply to meet her at eye level. "Does anything still hurt?" he asked gently. She nodded once. "My wrists, but I'm okay now." He nodded, then looked to Catherine. She gave a brief nod in return, answering an unspoken question. Then, finally, William turned to Camilla. She was already shaking her head. "So, this is being blown out of proportion," she said quickly. "It was a short demonstration. She's going to inherit these responsibilities. I was preparing her." William didn't blink. "You used her as a display rack," he said. "You used a child's body to support museum-grade material. And you did it inside a sealed room without oversight." Camilla's tone sharpened. "She embarrassed me in front of staff. She mocked my tone. I needed her to learn stillness." William rose. His voice stayed low, but colder now, sharper. "You needed her to stand still, so you tied stillness to pain." Camilla stepped forward. "You cannot seriously suggest I'm not suggesting," he said. "I'm ending." He turned to Rowan. "Effective immediately, revoke Queen Consort Camilla's access to all textile, heritage and archival rooms. Issue a safeguarding report to the Office of Royal Custodial Protection. Ensure full medical evaluation of the Princess within the hour." Rowan saluted. "Yes, sir." Catherine turned to leave with Charlotte, but the girl paused. She looked once at Camilla, not with challenge, just disbelief. Then she reached for William's hand, small fingers curling around his. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. William looked once more at Camilla. "This is not discipline," he said softly. "This is abuse." And then, without drama, he turned and walked away. The corridor no longer felt like part of the palace. It felt like a court that had just delivered its sentence. They didn't speak much on the walk to the medical suite. Charlotte moved between her parents, one hand held lightly in Catherine's, the other still flexing slightly from strain. A private physician had already been summoned. Quiet, professional. Prepared not to ask questions she wasn't qualified to answer. No cameras, no noise, no staff standing in doorways. Just a child whose silence finally meant she was safe. When they reached the archway leading back toward the public wings, Catherine turned gently to Rowan. "We'll take her from here." Rowan nodded once. No flourish, no ceremony, but as Charlotte crossed the threshold, she paused, glanced back over her shoulder, not at the bench, not at the fallen curtain, at him. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Instead, she raised her still trembling hand, not all the way, just enough to let her fingers graze the sleeve of his uniform as she passed. "Thank you," she said softly. Then she was gone, disappearing into a side hallway escorted by both parents. And Sergeant Rowan Ainsley was left alone with the truth. The gallery was still. The curtain lay in a collapsed pool of velvet, its brass rings scattered along the edge like spent shells. The bench where the tapestry had rested bore a slight depression in the cushion, proof of a weight now removed. Staff entered quietly behind him, gloves already on, careful not to ask questions. They began collecting the artifact with the care it had not been shown when balanced on a 10-year-old's arms. Rowan didn't interfere. He resumed his position at the mouth of the corridor, arms behind his back, posture squared, eyes forward. And for the first time since the confrontation, he allowed himself to breathe. Not deeply, just enough to let the gallery's silence return to what it was supposed to be. Solemn, preserved, clean, not complicit. A custodian passed him on the way out. She said nothing, but offered the faintest of nods. Gratitude in palace silence often looked like that. Wordless, tight-lipped, but meaningful. Behind the velvet that had once concealed harm, the space was now open. Light filtered in through high clerestory windows, touching the pale floor where Charlotte's stool had stood. The marks from its feet still pressed into the carpet. Not deep, but they'd take time to fade. And perhaps they shouldn't. Rowan remained still. Because after exposure, after confrontation, after consequence, there had to be someone who didn't move. Someone who didn't blink or look away. Not because the moment needed attention, but because it needed to be remembered. The child had been heard. The curtain had fallen. And the palace, whether it admitted it aloud or not, had changed. Just slightly, but permanently. Should any child, royal or not, ever be forced to endure pain for someone else's pride? Did the guard do the right thing tearing down the curtain when he heard her voice break? Tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story like this. Share this video with someone who believes children deserve protection. And with the next one already on your screen, watch it now. We'll see you tomorrow, same time with a brand new video.